Last time on TV Guys, myself, along with Matt and our guests Mike and Paul, competed in a sitcom draft. We each picked characters from various TV shows to assemble the cast of a new fictional show, and we asked you listeners to vote for your favorite. I'm happy to announce that the winner is Mike Campbell. Congratulations, Mike. We look forward to doing more drafts in the future, but in the meantime, we return you to your regularly scheduled podcast episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to TV Guys Survivor Edition, the show that Paul Risdall is calling a huge waste of time. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're excited. We're back talking about Survivor Season 3. Are you guys excited? I don't know, because I can't hear you.
No, this was definitely a throwback, because I don't know about you, Matt. I watched it when it first aired, like 20 years ago. Then I did a rewatch. Live about 5 years ago. I went through a binge over like a summer, and I watched a bunch of random seasons, and this was one of them. So this was my third rewatch of the season.
Yeah, I remember when we were talking about Season 2 a couple months back, and like I was getting my stuff confused. In my mind, like, because I haven't seen this since it was on air, and then the same with Survivor Australia. And so in my mind, I was confusing Tina and Teresa and kind of like conflating the two of them in my mind. And so like I remembered the Teresa's challenge where she won when she had her hand over in the bucket of water and she did the thing with Clarence. Like I remembered all of that, and I specifically remember her and Clarence, but I just couldn't remember what season it was. But it like launched into one of the biggest aspects of this season. And we can talk about it later, or we can start off with the Lex hunt, because that was really like the hook of post-merge Survivor Africa.
That was so annoying in this show, because it's like, obviously you don't like to have your name seen at Tribal Council, and Lex was expecting Clarence to vote for him, but he got the second mystery vote. And he wasn't just upset, he was like angry. He was like upset, like, I have to hunt this down, find this person, because this person like has no integrity, no morals. It's like, you realize that they're not doing anything wrong by voting for you. They're allowed to vote for you. He's acting like the right thing to do is to let him win. Like, at times it even seemed like he was pulling out his dad voice and being like, did you vote for me? It's like, yeah, we're in a game. I'm trying to win myself. That's how this works. And it just was so annoying.
What Survivor Season 3 had different from Season 2, one of them is there was a lot more talk about previous votes. Because like in Season 2, they knew from Season 1 that, you know, previous votes were the tiebreaker. But Season 3, it was like that was such a big point that kept getting brought up. And so I imagine like that was Lex's thing of like, crud, I've got more votes against me. It makes me more vulnerable in the future if there's a tie. And it's kind of funny to see the difference between pre-merge Lex and post-merge Lex, because I liked Lex as a character. I don't know if I'd enjoy hanging around with him, but I thought he was a really good character for the season, and it kind of becomes the Lex show once the merger happens, and it's mainly because of those votes.
Yeah, I agree, and I know that at some point they stopped using past votes to break ties. I don't know exactly when that started. This may be the last one that it was part of it.
There's a future one that I can't remember too much of when it was, but there's a survivor named Pascal.
That's next season. That's Season 4.
That's next season?
Yeah.
Well, spoiler alert. He gets the butt end of something that happens because of a split tie and one of the things that they change.
Yeah, I know. I thought of that too, but I don't know if that was because they stopped using previous votes or because maybe there was an equal number of previous votes that kind of canceled each other out anyways. I don't know.
That's a possibility. For those who don't know, and like it's 20-year-old spoiler, so you know, if you're watching along with us and then you're like, I want to save Survivor 4 until they watch it or whatever, then skip like a minute and a half. But I don't think anyone's doing that. There was like a 4-way vote, like 2 versus 2, and it was like the final 4, and like Pascal and this younger lady, I can't remember who it was, but the Nalia. she was allied with him versus these other two. I can't remember who the other two were. Very strong alliance. No one was breaking it. 2 versus 2 vote. So they did this thing where it's like everyone but the person with immunity would get a rock. And Pascal didn't have any votes towards him, but he didn't have immunity. So he was one who got a rock. And so they all held the rock out to see. And the color showed that Pascal was the one who got voted out, even though he wasn't voted for in that 2-way tie. And so he kind of got the short end of the stick in that regard.
If you think that's bad, just wait till we get to season 34 with what fans are calling advantage getting. But that's going to be a ways away.
I would say remind me of that, but I guarantee both of us are going to forget about it. So,
well, I won't because when we get to that season, because I mean, we will have just watched what happens.
So let's go back to Lex, because I think Lex is such a strong character, and if that's what we're starting with, then we have a lot that we need to talk about. Yeah. Because Lex early on, like I said, he's a very different character pre-merge, and he's easier to root for pre-merge. He seems pretty down to earth. I do find it funny in like the second episode when they're going to be going to tribal council again, because they all were upset with Clarence and what he did with the beans. We'll get into that in a little bit. Yeah. But Clarence did something right away that put him on shaky ground. And so Lex, in a talking head in the second episode, says something like, we might have someone vote again for Clarence just to remind him that he's on shaky ground. And it's like the hypocrisy that you would say, we're going to do that. And then you get 2 votes against you and you freak out about it. It's funny.
Lex, okay, I think Lex is the most prominent character. He's like out there, like you remember Lex, but
yes,
he's also super entitled. Like he's good at the game, he's good at strategy, and that, but like he just felt like he was deserved the win. Yeah, which I really don't like. And it was easy to root for him early on because pre-merge, all you had to do to be someone you could root for is be on the Baran tribe.
All right, we can talk about that. I'm sure we'll circle back to some stuff with Lex because, like we said, he's a big character this season. Yeah. But the Baran versus the my gosh, why am I blanking? What's the other?
Samburu.
The Samburu tribe, like night and day difference in terms of tribe unity. I have never, and I'm trying to think back to the Survivor seasons I've seen. I can't think of any Survivor season that has such a disunified tribe pre-merger than this Samburu tribe. Can you think of anything that's that bad?
I'm sure there probably is, but maybe some parts of All Stars.
But it was so clear right away. Like the 4 older people, they came together because, and I think part of it is age, but I think it was also partly work ethic. I think that maybe like if Kim Powers, she's one of the younger ones, if she did not have Brandon and Silas and Lindsay like right there with her, dragging her down, I think she probably could have rose to the challenge. But I think Lindsay and Brandon especially didn't really think through what they're getting into, and their work ethic just wasn't there. And so like those other 4 were like, we're holding the tribe together and we need to come up with our own alliance. And so right away there was that even split right down the middle, and they never healed from it.
And it's funny, like, and so this is season 30. This is season 3, right? Back to like 2001. So the younger people were the Gen Xers, and they were talking about how like these young Gen Xers, they don't have any work ethic. They're so. Fast forward to season 33. It's a season called Millennials versus Gen X. And then the Gen Xers are now the older people looking at people, me and Matt's generation, millennials, saying, these millennials, they don't have any work ethic. It's like a cycle. Like the younger people become the older people. And it's every cycle. I found myself saying some of that stuff about Gen Z now too. It's a perpetuating cycle.
Yeah, I mean, it really is true of how older generations view younger generations. It's kind of always been that way. And you might think, when I'm older, I'll be okay. No. And I look at like some of the Gen Z and some of the like Gen Alpha, I think, stuff that's being said, and I'm like, this is really stupid. But I can at least appreciate that I said a lot of stupid things when I was that age. So I'm like, whatever. I can't really hold it against him. But it's like
Okay.
that old Simpsons quote where like Abe, the grandpa, is like,
Mhm.
I used to be young and with it, and then they changed what it was, and now it is scary and unfamiliar. It'll happen to you. And I'm like, that is crazy accurate.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna say it as a blanket statement. I'm just gonna embrace my inner Grandpa Simpson right now. If we happen to have any younger listeners who say things like Ohio skibbity toilet riz, I hate everything that you like.
That's my son. Try having that in the house all day. Elijah, he's been on our show before a couple times. He says it to the nth degree. And we were driving home from, like, we live pretty close to Winona, but that is on the interstate to get there, and so it's like 20 minutes away. So as we're passing a sign, it's an Adopt a Highway sign, and one of the houses from Winona State University is Sigma Sigma Sigma, and they are on the Adopt a Highway sign. So I pointed it out to Elijah, and I'm like, look, Elijah, Sigma, Sigma, Sigma. I'm like, or no, actually, as I'm getting close to it, I'm like, hey, Elijah, my name's on there. And he looks at it. He's like, Dad. So here's the thing. When you're old, you use what the terms the youth use, and they stop using it. If you get tired of it and you're old and uncool like Brian and I, just start adopting it into your vocabulary.
Sounds like a solid plan.
It's worked. I did a rap about the word YOLO when I was a youth pastor, and after I did it, the entire youth group stopped using the YOLO phrase.
Was that a while ago? Because I feel like YOLO's been dead for a while.
That was like 10 years ago.
Okay. So
I think I killed it. It was around the same time as planking.
Okay, yeah, both were referenced in The Office.
Look at that.
So back to Survivor. So the Samburu tribe, again, it was an older, younger split, and the younger people. One point, one of them even says like, this is just like a cool camping trip. We're just hanging out." And it's like the audience and the older people are both thinking, "This is a show called Survivor. This is not the first season. You should know what this is about."
Yeah, I felt so bad. Like, okay, so we've got the two highlights of this season. We've got the Lex hunt and we've got the tribe swap. And those are like really, those are the big things that happen, apart from, of course, who the winner is. And so when they did the tribe swap, it was so fresh. And even I remember the ad for it. They're like, something's happening next week. Don't miss the first 15 minutes. Everyone's going to be talking about this. And so when there was that push that came to shove and Carl got voted out, and that stinks, and Carl was the Gen X. That episode when he got voted out, he said the words Gen X like 20 times, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I liked Carl, but he got voted out because, he was already rich. And so they're like, well, he doesn't need the money. So they vote him out. And then you have those three just slim pickings. And then they hit Linda next. And then there's like, well, Frank and Teresa are going to get voted out. And yet they got saved, like the luckiest turn of events to have those two and Silas. I think Silas could easily be one of the most unlucky survivors in the history of Survivor, because it's like, that was literally the worst possible situation and moment for him, because he had zero allies from his old tribe or his new tribe.
I think so too, because Frank and Teresa, they were on the bottom. And what I don't like about this, it wasn't just that they were on the bottom. Like, again, kind of like how Lex was was treating people later on, like he was in charge. Like, the younger people had the numbers. Yep. And so they told Frank and Teresa, and again, it was Linda, like, hey, you guys all need to put your votes on Lindsay so that only one of us has votes going forward, like, be a team player. And they're like, well, screw that. Like, you're basically just telling us accept our fate and do what you tell us. And again, after they didn't, Silas was like talking to them like a disappointed, like, you didn't do what we told you to do. It's like, these people need to realize that just because you're in the numbers, everyone can write whatever name they want on immunity, except for the person who won immunity. Like, you are not in charge of anyone else's vote as much as you want to be.
It was the same entitlement you hated about Lex.
Yes.
And weirdly enough, it didn't bother me as much with Lex. Like, I wasn't like, yay, Lex, he's a fan favorite of mine, I love him. He was just interesting, but I didn't hate his entitlement quite as much as I disliked their entitlement.
Yeah.
But their issue was that they thought they won when Carl was voted off because they had the numbers. So they skated on that. And that, like, all three of those guys ended up getting voted out. Brandon at least had a little bit of foresight after the merge to be like, all right, I see the ship sinking. I need to figure this out. But he also was too emotional to understand that the other side, they had the numbers. If Brandon would have stuck with the Samburu tribe, they would have had the numbers to pick off that alliance. And they could have gotten Tom and Ethan and Kim out and Lex. But they didn't take advantage of the Kelly flip because of her annoyance with Lex. And if they would have taken advantage of that, they could have had the numbers. It would have been a very different game. Then he wouldn't have. He still wouldn't have had to ally with Frank. But like that was his thing. Because of Frank, I'm not voting with him. I'm voting with these other guys who are going to vote me out one episode later.
We're like you see in a lot of seasons, like if you say like I am not going to vote for this person because I don't like them, well, that limits you, and you should vote for whatever's going to progress your game the farthest because you should be on there to win. And I love after the tribe swap, it wasn't it Lex, Tom, and Kelly who came over to the Samburu tribe.
Yep.
And even them, they were like, "Your tribe is a piece of crap. Like, why don't you have it?" And then the best part of it was they were saying, "Oh, there's like no firewood anywhere around," and it immediately cuts to like a montage of three of them throwing piles of firewood, like firewood. It's like, and it just cements because, I mean, sure, Tom is older, but Lex and Kelly are both around the same age as the lazy younger people.
Yep.
Like all three of them are like not lazy, and it's just that group of people.
Yeah, like what a terrible. It just kind of really shows me like that one like show me your friends and I'll show you your future sort of thing of like the influence that people can have on you if you are just you guys have the wrong personalities together. Like they all might have been fine individually if they wouldn't have been on the same tribe or something like that. If they couldn't gotten split up, maybe they would have gone farther. Brandon showed he had a penchant for I'll do what it takes. I want to win, even though he wasn't the smartest with it because the emotions got in the way. Kim showed that she had a fierceness about her. She was ready to compete. Silas was scheming. I don't think Silas is as smart as he thought he was.
No.
And Lindsay was a strong competitor, but she also was emotional as well. But like any four of those guys could have gone farther and could have done better if they weren't united in their crapitude.
Agreed. And this is why you realize we're not really talking about the Baran tribe that much because the only thing early on that is really worth talking about with the Baran tribe, which we should get to, is Diane and Clarence and the rice. Other than that, that whole tribe, the beans. Everyone else on that tribe got along pretty well. So there wasn't a ton of story on that side of it pre-merge.
Yeah. Man, Clarence is lucky he is strong and a good competitor. Because, like, he got the most votes, I think, from one person. He got the most votes from one person in, like, any survivor that I can think of. Because Tom voted for him 3 separate times. I don't know if anyone has had someone vote for them 3 or more times. I'm sure we'll see it at some point. But, like, especially up to this point. Tom kept voting for him, kept being like, Clarence, you stole my beans. I'm mad at you. And like, they kept him around because they needed to compete and they needed his strength. And as soon as they hit the merge, what do? All right, we've got the numbers. We can get rid of Clarence. We're still mad. See you later.
Well, actually, I don't know about that because I don't know if when he got voted out, it was because of the beans. I think by then they had forgiven him. Clarence is a really good physical competitor.
Yeah.
And it was down to him versus Teresa. And they showed like he could potentially go on like a Colby run and like just decimate all the immunities. I think that was their motivation for getting rid of Clarence because they didn't want him to run away with the immunities.
I think too him lasting as long as he did in that challenge might have even worked against him because it might have confirmed their fears. Like, oh crap, Clarence is going to win this. He could win this and then win every single one. And instead, we saw Lex win a lot. Lex didn't do a Colby or is it Kelly from the first season who won a bunch in a row? Yep. He didn't do either of those, but he did win a good amount.
Yeah, and it's funny because when it came to that challenge, the whole reason that Teresa didn't voted for Lex and not instead of Clarence because she had that respect for Clarence. Because
Yeah.
it was those two against, and it came down to rock paper scissors, and like she held up to her her oath or her promise to Clarence in that moment. Because I think he was generally, because by the time that happened, we had seen so much drama with the Samburu tribe and the tribe swap and everything that
Yeah.
the Beans were kind of old news by that point.
Yeah. And I think the tribe swap was good in terms of like mixing up who's going to get, because like the voting didn't make any sense if you look at it from a strategic point of view. Like I really respect that Teresa did that, and I don't think Teresa thought that Clarence wasn't going to get voted out. I don't think she had any thought that Lex was really in danger or that they had any numbers. I think she's just like, I made an oath, and I'm just going to follow that oath, which is great. Yeah. But what was I just lost my train of thought because I chased that rabbit trail to wrap up what we were talking about before I was going to jump into the next thing, and I forgot.
I don't know.
Oh, great. Good job, me.
Speaking of that, it was funny because, when Lex is going on his hunt, he lands, he thinks it's Kelly. But before that, he's talking to Teresa.
That's right.
And he's saying, like, man, I know I can trust you. I know it's not you. My gut is telling me that it's not you. But, man, I can't wait to get my hands on the person who voted for me. Like, his gut is wrong most of the time whenever he says that.
Yeah, that's where I started, was talking about how the votes didn't make sense because they had the 6-4 advantage. If you're just looking at old Boran versus Samburu allegiances, because after the tribe swap, it was 2 members of the old Samburu tribe that got voted out. Mm-hmm. And so then they make it to the merge, and it's 6-4. They vote out Clarence. And then because of the stupid Lex thing, here's what I love about that episode, because Kelly was heard them out because like the Samburu tribe was like, this is our chance. There's cracks in the armor. Lex is freaking out. Maybe we can turn someone. Kelly might be willing to turn. And so when they first approached her, Kelly like heard him out, but she's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not betraying my alliance. And then she actually says, but good luck with your coup. And I thought was a hilarious line from Kelly. Yeah. And then Lex comes after her, and she's like, okay, fine, forget you. And then she joins that side only for Brandon to flop and to vote out Kelly and get her. And it's like, this makes no sense. And then they had the 4-4 potential votes. And so they knew Lex had some votes. They easily could have taken control if they weren't stupid, but Brandon screwed it up for him.
Yeah, definitely. It's just, again, go with whatever's going to progress you farther, even if you have to align with Frank, which for the most part, I don't think Frank was too bad for the most part. He just didn't have good social skills.
No, he was like Rudy. He was the Rudy stand-in that they got. I don't think he's as good of a character as Rudy was.
Oh, Rudy's better.
But yeah, Rudy was. But I do think that the producers, they couldn't have planned it any better when they had the one reward challenge where they're teaming up. And they're like, well, we're not going to pick it. We're going to be fair about this. And we're just going to draw straws. And the two, Brandon and Frank, get put together. And then they win the whole thing. Like, that is just great reality show television. I'm sure the producers are like, this is the best. I don't know how this happened, but we thank God that this is what we got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is Frank just being awkward too. Like, one point he's like out waving his arm like an elephant trunk, trying to communicate with elephants.
Yeah.
And then so after the merge, they all said, "Hey, let's be fun and play. Was it I have never, or how do you pronounce it?
Never have I ever,
or I never." And they're all doing like the way you think of like the fun, like risque stuff. Like Teresa is a flight attendant. She admitted that she'd had sex on an airplane. And they finally get Frank to come
in a bathroom.
What is it?
With Eartha Kitt in a bathroom.
Yep.
It came up naturally.
I'm not going to make my joke that I made last time because that's repeating it. But anyways,
that's fair.
Yeah. Then it goes to Frank, and he's like, "Never have I ever broken the honor of a handshake." And they all stand awkwardly, Like, what? And then after a minute, it's like in Family Feud. They're like, good answer, good answer.
I like how Teresa, like so many times, because of the situation, she kind of had to have her wagon hitched to Frank. Yeah. And yet she is she's so aware of how he is. She's very intelligent. I said this when we were talking about Survivor Africa between just the two of us. I said that I think if you would have swapped, and we haven't even talked about Kim Johnson and Ethan Zahn yet because those are the two biggies, but I think if you would have swapped Teresa and Kim for the very initial tribe, and Teresa would have gotten good with that group, I honestly think Teresa would have won Survivor. I think she would have gotten it. I like her. I'm also a sucker for folksy charm. We haven't talked much about Tom yet, and he's the Roger stand-in. Yeah, Tom is great. He's Roger, but drunker and more outlandish.
But one thing about Teresa before we move on to Tom is, so with Teresa, going forward to season 31 was called Second Chances, and it was all people who had only played once before and never won. Mm-hmm. And they actually did it by a fan vote. They had a large pool of former contestants, and Teresa was one of them. And then in the previous finale, like the live finale for season 30, they had all of those contestants were in the audience, and Jeff Probst was like going through and reading the audience votes and saying, like, this person was on this season. Like, yes, they're going to go on. They get to go up on stage. Or like, sorry, you didn't get enough votes. And he gets to Teresa, and she didn't have enough votes, and so we didn't get it. We missed out on seeing her play a second time. And I think it had to have just been because of recency bias, because by then we had seen it had been a long time since she had played. But that would have been cool to see her go on to that season.
Yeah, she was a character that I really liked.
Okay, so Tom.
Oh man.
Tom has this ability that he can say anything that would maybe get someone else canceled or get them upset with, and he gets away with it. Like, a few examples. A young lady's got something on her hind end. I guess that's a job for Tom. And then like the girls say, oh yeah, Tom was like helping us pour water down our shirts for bathing, and it was fun because it was Tom. And he goes up to Brandon and he goes like, hey, are you gay? Just like Tom cannot get canceled in 2001.
What? Yeah, nowadays he might have.
Yeah, exactly.
But one of my favorite tone deaf things of his was during the auction reward challenge when he bids with Ethan on this mystery plate, and then they reveal it, and it's a breakfast meal, and he gets so excited because there's this big chunk of ham, and Ethan's Jewish, so Tom's just running around yelling, he's a Jew, he ain't gonna eat it, he's a Jew, and so, like, he's gonna get all this ham for himself.
Yeah.
And like later he kind of wised up and apologized, and like Ethan's like, I don't hold it against you, but I'm sure it felt weird for him just yelling he's a Jew, running around in circles around the whole camp.
Yeah. It's just, I think it works because Ethan, we could tell Ethan was not offended by it at all.
Yeah. Ethan's a good character. He's a great person to win the game. But I remember, like, he wasn't one of my favorites just because he was a bit of a wallflower, but I didn't have anything against him. Mm-hmm. And I think for the cast of this Survivor, being in that group that made it towards the end, but not like offending anyone, I think that was the strategy for this group, because there were some really offensive people that just like ran out ahead and put targets on their back, and they got dealt with while Ethan was able to kind of lay low. He never was lazy enough that anyone was looking bad at him. He always competed in the challenges and even won a couple, but never like ran away with it. He voted on the right side a lot of times, but
he was smart, but he played dumb.
Yeah.
I like Tom, but a lot of that is from All Stars, but he's still good in this season too.
Yeah. Ethan was the Amber Burkich of this season, but I mean Amber in All Stars with her and Boston Rob.
Yeah,
not season
Ethan. Should we get into this? Because like, there's two ways to look at it. There's one way to look at it. I'm sure there's people on both sides where, like, you know, you can tell that Lex thought it was his season all along. He had a lot of good strategy, and everything. and he wasn't in the final two. And Ethan was kind of just on his side the whole time. You can think of it as like he rode Lex's coattails. Or
Yeah.
do you think that Ethan was so personable, he got most of the jury on his side. He didn't ruffle feathers while still maintaining to be on the right side of the vote, and that it is a legitimate win? Or which way do you fall on that?
I think that juxtaposition between Lex and Ethan, I never thought of this until like right now. Lex and Silas are two sides of the same coin, except for Lex is actually as smart as he thinks he is, where Silas thought he was smarter than he was.
Yeah.
I think they both had that same personality, and yet Silas came off as cocky, and Lex, even though you caught like some of that entitlement, he still was personable enough that he didn't make too many people mad. Like, I know we talked about his Lex hunt and everything, and people didn't like it, but still he was personable. Ethan brought him on the reward challenge.
Mm-hmm.
He won the reward challenge, so he brought Tom on that one. But he was friends with people. They enjoyed him, and they still wanted him as part of that final four, even if they had their skiffs. So Lex wasn't as antagonistic as we're kind of making him out to be, I think. But I think Ethan, to go back to your question, wasn't smart, but I think he lucked into it, but he had a good personality for what he lucked into.
Yeah.
And if you look at like the reunion afterwards, he was one that talked a little bit about like needing the luck. And he even said that in one of his jury answers, that like what you need to win the game, there's two things that he said, and then one of them was luck. Like he was aware that it wasn't so much the supreme strategy he had. He just got along well with people, and he was lucky that that's all really that you needed in this season.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. If it was Lex and Ethan in the finals, Lex has some haters, so who do you think would have won?
I still think it would have been Ethan. Brandon would have voted Lex. Kelly would have voted Ethan. Tom would have voted Ethan.
Yeah.
Kim would have voted Ethan. No, Kim would have voted Lex. I think Kim respected Lex. I think both Kim would have voted Lex.
Yeah. Frank could have gone either way, and I don't know about
Teresa
Kim Powers.
Could have gone either way.
Yeah, same with Kim Powers, and so it could have been either one of them, but yeah, I think it could have been. And Ethan ended up being kind of in a situation, kind of on accident, as Richard Hatt was, where he fell out of the challenge on accident at the final three challenge. Mm-hmm. And then so he didn't have to be the one to get rid of Lex.
Yeah.
So then I believe he still got Lex's vote, because I think that he would have gotten rid of Lex. Honestly, I think he would have, because I think he knew that Lex was his biggest competition.
Yeah, and Lex would have voted for Kim.
Then. Yeah, if Ethan had voted him out, he would have voted Kim.
But I will say, both Lex and Tom, when we're watching this, like they played a game well, but they bowed out gracefully. When they were voted out, they both were like, "Hey, I respect the decision." Like even Lex, when Kim, you could tell, was really struggling with the decision, Lex was like, "Hey, no hard feelings. It's a game. I understand. It sucks that I didn't make it to the 2, but I made it to the 3, and that's okay." He appreciated his game that he played. So,
and we should it'd be a good point to mention that Kim Johnson, the second place winner, or second place to Ethan, just recently did pass away. I saw that Jeff Probst had made that statement, and I think she still held the record for either the oldest person to win an immunity or the oldest woman to win an immunity, something like that. Yeah. That's what it was.
Yeah, because that's what he said in his post, is that as one of the oldest, like up to that point she was, but I think that kept the record, and that was 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so she still had a good couple decades on her after the show.
He said she still holds the record for the oldest woman to ever win an immunity challenge.
Man, and she's a great, like, good for her for what she was able to do. But like, now that we've honored her, because like she's dead, you don't want to talk ill of the dead, but I wasn't so impressed with her game.
No.
she was one of those that was just there for me, you know, like she was part of the right alliance, which is why she made it as far as she did. Same with Ethan. It was just they were in the right group and they were tight knit, whereas everyone else was fighting. And so she made it there. A little bit of luck, but she did earn her spot in the final two in those last couple games where she won. And I liked how the jury, like, one of my favorite things about the jury questions is that for some reason it let Kim feel like I'm just gonna dump on Tom. There's like two different questions she was asked, and she like was like, no offense to him, but Tom, like, who did you learn the least from while you were here? Well, Tom, you made me laugh, but I didn't really respect it. Who was the least deserving person to be in your spot? Probably Tom. I'm glad he's not here. Like, okay, calm down, Kim. He's not voting for you anyway.
And Tom's okay, so they have a little thing where it's like that you see the jury members talking about, well, this is what I'm going to bring into the final challenge. I'm going to ask him this, and then Tom's like, well, I already know who we're going to vote for, so I'm going to just be silly and fun, and I want them to think, what the heck is Tom talking about? And he did. He said that his thing was, if I came in and ate the mush that we had to eat, and then licked its hind end, was it to get the mush out of its mouth, or was it because of animal instinct? And Kim just answers it straight-faced, like a real, like, well, I think it's an animal instinct. And when and taste is the first thing that goes out the window. Like, she didn't give it 1 inch of, like, humor, like, oh, Tom, you're being funny at all. And, like, I feel like the jury was even looking at her like, why are you giving this question this sincerity that it doesn't deserve? Tom's not looking for sincerity. He's just being Tom.
I would have done this if I was in that spot. But so Kelly asks hey, what's the number between 1 and 1,000? Pick one. Yeah. Kim answers first, and she says something like small, like 3. Like, okay, the strategy of those things is to try and cover as much ground as possible. So if you're the first to go, you say like 500. You pick the number right in the middle if you're looking for odds. But like if I was Ethan right after her, I would have been like, oh, 4. And then that way, if you're the closest one, if you cover between 4 and 1,000, and although that might have been like, oh, that's a cheap answer, and then she would have changed her mind after that anyway. But
I have a suspicion that she knew who she was going to vote for, and the number thing was just to kind of like have a little mind jab, because like just to make them sweat about it. I don't think that she
gave her reasoning. She gave her reasoning right afterwards of like the Graduate movie and the room that he was in.
Yeah. But she could have also just thought about, oh, what's something I could say about this number. Like, I don't know. I don't think that she chose based on the number, but I could be wrong.
I think so, just because it was such a specific, like, oh, this is the number and that's closest. I thought her reasoning I bought into, but also it's dumb to let it come down to that.
Yeah. So I know we have stuff to get into with the reunion, but is there anything that we're missing from the actual season first?
There is just a couple things that I definitely wanted to talk about. One of them was I wanted to talk about just how hard this season was, because I looked on like a Reddit board of people who talk about Survivor, and someone like within the last couple of years posted something about Survivor Africa, and they're like, is this the hardest season that there was physically? Because if you look down the line, like anywhere that you get like a water pump, or you have like a river next to you or something like that, like you can't be in the running for the hardest, because their water source was like puddles. It was barely there. Plus, they had the animals they dealt with. Like, we saw even right away the response of Diane passing out during the first challenge. Mm-hmm. Jessie in the second episode, like, she was dealing with dehydration. We saw towards the end, there was a doctor who was watching this, and they diagnosed Lex, because in like that final, before the final 3 challenge where they're standing there, Jeff Probst comes and he wakes them up early in the morning. And Lex had been up throughout the night, like 5 or 6 times. He's like, I just couldn't stop pooping. I was having trouble. So a doctor was like, that, I believe, is early stage kidney failure. Like, Lex being in that environment for just over a month, his kidneys were dying on him. Like, all of that. And then you don't even mention the fact that they have these predators that are right outside. The wildlife of Africa is extremely dangerous. And it's like, I can't think of another season that is this
I think you're
physically
right.
demanding.
And they don't even move where they were moving around to different spaces, like, and using the culture and like the imagery of that was such a big part of Survivor, and that shows the decline in its like budget and popularity now, because for the past like 10 years or so, no, not 10 years, like 10 seasons, maybe 3-4 years or so, they're just in the same spot anymore. They have like, this is our Survivor land, we own this area. And if you look closely, like people who have been on recent seasons, they can just watch it and be like, oh, I spent a month there. That's where I had my beach, because I remember that tree and that tree and that tree, and they're just not even moving anywhere. They have different themes, different people. They go in, and after the season, they go in and reset it. They take everything down, but it's like they don't move. They're not doing like, let's go to China and talk about all the Chinese temple stuff anymore. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I can see the reason of doing that. Like, you said it's a cost-cutting measure, which it 100% is.
Yeah.
But I can also see, like, this streamlines the process. It makes it easier, because I can't, like, the planning that has to go into the behind the scenes of it, I'm sure was just ridiculous.
Well, in the early stages of Survivor, they were basically printing money. Like, they had all the money in the world. Another thing interesting is that I didn't know this until I heard this on a podcast, and it could be wrong, but actually sounds like something I believe. This is the last season they ever did a challenge where it's like a trivia question about your contestants.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's because what I heard is that, so one of the questions was, what female contestant has no piercings, not even their ears? And Lex had said Lindsay, but then, oh no, the answer is Kelly. Well, this was in the finale. So the live finale, like, as leading up to it, all the contestants were like back in the green room watching it live, and they get to that answer, and Lindsay was there, and she's like, because Lindsay was voted out pre-merge, or no, yeah, and she's like, oh yeah, that's true. I don't have any piercings. So technically, Lex should have gotten that counted as correct. And I think that in order to,
it was Lex who voted that. I thought it was Tom who said it.
Oh, I think maybe it was both of them, but I know for sure Lex did. But and so because of that, Kim and Johnson ended up winning and voting Tom out at that point, which we know that Lex, Tom, and Ethan were the tight three, and Kim would have been voted out. So I think that both Tom and Lex got more money payouts because of their mistake. I think they were both guaranteed spots in All Stars because of that.
Yeah, well, that was the other thing I wanted to talk about, is I want to talk about a couple challenges, because there's a couple things. First of all, I wanted to hit on a few reward challenges, because this had some unique rewards.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, because they really took advantage of the African setting. So, I mean, like, one that was really cool was the African safari, like, from the hot air balloon, and that Lex won and Tom was together, and they had their meal there and was seeing it. Then there was like the really cool, I think, like after they gave Lex the car of like, well, you're also going to use it to give AIDS medicine to this hospital. And so that was a really cool moment. But I love the weird random, like, hey, Ethan, you won a challenge. Here's a goat. Go sell it. That's your reward. I'm like, that's not a reward. That's an obligation, man. And they drop him off in this town, and they're like, no one's going to help us sell these goats. So,
and then they're like, oh, cool. Maybe the goats are going to get to go run around on a farm. Oh, never mind. They're at the butcher. It's like, oh my God.
And then Brian Gumbel in the reunion afterwards is like, just so you know, you sold them for top dollar, like $1,000 per goat. Great job. It's like, good. And then we use that money to buy French fries. So the most expensive French fries you can possibly imagine. I don't know if it was $1,000 or if it was like 1,000 of the African currency, and it would have translated to something lower here. But still, like selling a whole goat and using that money just to buy French fries, I still think the inflation of that might have left something to be desired.
Yeah, it was an interesting challenge, but it's also a little interesting when you think about it. Like for Ethan and Lex, and for us as the viewing audience, it's like a novelty to see how this village works. But for everyone there, that's just their everyday life. You know, it's like.
I remember you saying something about this challenge too, with like Ethan and the hacky sack and like playing with the village kids and giving them to them, like that, something about that moment that you really loved. right?
And this kind of also like, this is the first time I ever picked the winner of the very first episode. I remember I was just like, all it was is, hey, that guy's got cool curly hair. I want him to win. And that was the only thing. I liked his hair. And then I rooted him to win. It's the only time in like 45 seasons that I've chosen the winner and correctly on the first episode.
And everything's been downhill ever since.
Yeah. But you're right, like that hacky sack thing showed like, just like, I mean, yeah, it's just a hacky sack. I'm not saying he was like Mother Teresa for giving up his hacky sack, but just like he had such delight just hanging out with these kids and playing with them. And it just, I don't know. He's just a good dude. You can argue whether or not he deserved to win, but he was a good dude.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's probably one of those guys that in this show, I think that he'd be the best to hang out with. Like him, or I think Teresa also has a good heart and good nature. And and then like I keep bringing up Kim Powers because I feel like she didn't shine as much as she could have, but I think she had a good personality to like have gone far or do good things, or like be someone that would be fun to hang out with. Yeah. But I don't feel like we saw enough of her because there was just bigger personalities all around, and she kind of sunk into the background a little bit in some ways.
Yeah. Well, in that challenge where Frank and Brandon got paired up, she was paired up with Tom, and that was also a pretty funny pairing.
That was a great pairing. It was really fun to see those two. It was like one of those, this works. It works really well.
Yeah, Big Tom and Little Kim. They called her Little Kim because of the other Kim being... They didn't call her Old Kim. It was just Kim and Little Kim.
Nor do they call her Big Kim, which also would not have been fun. And it wouldn't have been true because she was like a stick.
No, but she was taller because Little Kim was also like, what, like 5 foot nothing? I don't know.
Yeah. There's 3 other challenges I want to talk about, and these are more the challenges versus the rewards or the afterwards. But we had the challenge that I think this is the first time and the only time that I can remember of seeing a tribe, I think, throw the challenge, because once they did the tribe swap, Silas was there, and like Frank and Teresa had said, like in the talking head, they're like, it wouldn't be so bad if we lost this. And they kind of had like a little bit of scheming, talking with like Ethan or someone else. Like, we don't have to win this challenge tonight, because they knew all of them were going to vote off Silas, and that might be a good option to get Silas off. And so it was the puzzle challenge, and you saw Silas like really rushing and trying to get it. And I just didn't see the pep in the step of anyone else on the tribe. I think they actually threw the challenge. What do you think?
It's definitely, it might have been the first, but it was definitely not the last time. There's several times, especially when you get into seasons where they have hidden immunity idols. That's the thing, where there were several times that someone threw a challenge to try to force someone to flush their idol out. But it may have been the first. And I think they never come out and say we threw this challenge. But I think either they threw it, or they're like, well, we're going to conserve our energy. Well, if we end up winning, we end up winning. But if we're not we don't need to win it. Yeah.
The other 2 I wanted to talk about, one of them is the gross food challenge. They always have a gross food challenge. And this year, like the last 2 were like, oh, eat bugs, eat a cow brain, blah, blah, blah. This one, we're going to poke a hole into a cow and drink its blood. That's what your challenge is. I'm like, what are we watching?
Yeah, this was prime time for families to watch. At this time, I sat there with my parents and watched that on like a Thursday night when I was 13. And of course, they have to say like, the cow's blood has been tested and it's not diseased or anything. It's completely safe. I don't know if I would trust that.
I'd still be like, I'm okay getting voted on this one. Let's move on.
Okay, in my line of work, a lot of times if you go to get a box of graham crackers, right? Sometimes the box on the outside may have like a tab that's open and it looks like, oh, it's open. It's not, because there's a bag inside the box and that's sealed. And just PSA for everybody, that's fine. The bag is still sealed. It's kind of the same thing. We're like, but this isn't a box of graham crackers. This was a live cow that they're pouring the blood out of.
A little different.
Yeah.
The other I wanted to bring up, so you and I have said before, I don't know if we said it on an episode or not, but like we don't watch Survivor for the challenges. We watch it for the strategy and then some of the survival elements too. And the challenges are like, okay, they're there, and sometimes they're intriguing.
Yeah.
this season had one really good challenge, and that was the flight rescue for like see from a plane
Yes.
SOS.
I'm glad you brought this up.
Yeah, because it's a great challenge, and it's
Mhm.
the challenge itself is fine, but the reaction of the Baran tribe was
Yes.
fantastic.
It's all summed up in Tom's narration, and I'm going to try to do my best, Tom. Like,
Okay.
well, we got a big black man in his white skivvies. We got ladies down dressed in almost nothing. We got people running around and waving all kinds of colors. I got a feather in my bum. If any pilot doesn't want to stop and see this, then I want to talk to that pilot.
That was a terrible Tom, but
But
I'll allow it.
yeah,
I find it so funny. So one of the things that they did that was really smart was Kim Johnson had these like dyes, and they dyed their mosquito nets. Great use of color. The pilot himself said it, or the rescuer said it himself, and that I think that's the big thing that wins the challenge. But then they amplify it by like getting the attraction of them by like they're all skimped down to their underwear, including freaking Kim Johnson in what I think is like an old person thong. And then for some reason Tom thinks the added element is to take a long feather and stick it coming out of his butt crack. Like, they're not gonna see that from the plane, Tom. You're doing this for you at this point.
yeah. It's, you know what? Maybe it makes him feel pretty.
It might. All right, we had to bring it up. It's
like,
a great challenge. Great.
You'll appreciate this. Did Marty McFly need to wear purple Calvin Klein underwear, or was that just for him?
I don't want to answer that question. I've already talked enough about underwear. I'm moving on. All right, so we brought up the reunion, and this is Brian Gumbel went a bridge too far on this one, right?
A few times. And this is the last time we have Brian Gumbel. After this, we get Rosie O'Donnell, and then after that, they're like, oh, why don't we just have Jeff Probst do it for the rest of the time?
I'm Rosie O'Donnell. Why? Why are you here?
Exactly.
And they did try and trick us too on this one. This one, they're like, all right, we're going to read the votes and everyone be quiet. Don't make a noise. We're going to have everyone still dressed in the same thing they're wearing. And yet you could still hear like the echoes of the sound stage as they're reading the votes.
That's what gave it away. I mean, other than we know that after season 1, it's all live on a stage. But yeah, you can tell, like I said, with the audio that Jeff's voice is being broadcast to an entire stadium.
Yeah. I wonder if there was any leaks from season 1. Like if, they read the votes on the island and like, okay, we found out Richard won. And if anyone like leaked the coming off the island, and that's why they decided to do it the way they did going forward.
And also, I mean, technically all you have to do is have all the jury get together. Who'd you vote for? Who'd you vote for? Who'd you vote for?
Yeah. But they won't do it. They got a non-disclosure agreement. Although I'm sure that's actually, they have to sign those. I feel pretty confident.
Yeah. No, I'm certain.
But yeah, so for me, I know you had a couple things that you wanted to talk about like what Gumbel asked that was like bad, or some things he said. For me, one of them that I wrote down was when he was like talking, I can't remember who he was asking, but he was talking about like, you didn't want to be put as the one, like the Southern one, like Roger, or the, and then he says, or the dumb one, like Amber. And as he's asking it, like a couple people, like their face, like, wait, what? No one's calling her dumb. Why is she the dumb one?
No, she was just not as like outward and like as much of a character. But yeah, and from the very beginning, they did this thing where they take time, they announce every single person. Well, here are the contestants of Survivor Africa. We have this person, like Diane, this person, and then it eventually gets down to, okay, so Ethan's last name is Ethan Zahn, Zohn. He says, and our winner, Ethan Zorn. And as soon as he said that, Ethan kind of gives him like a head tilt, like, really? I'm the winner of the season. You can't get my name right?
Just make sure the check spells it right. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. And they show, I said this is, they show a few of their audition tapes. And I guess the way to get your audition tape shown at the finale is to not wear a shirt. Because they had Tom, I'm going to include Tom because he's wearing his overall with no shirt, being Tom. They had Kim Powers, who was in a bathtub being all flirty. And then you had Lindsay, who was riding a bike naked. And of course, they have everything blurred out for TV. And then to make it even more creepy, Brian Gumbel's like, just so you know, we watched the uncensored version backstage. It's like, why say that?
And then I couldn't see it clearly, so I had them watch it again. And I asked them to just replay it multiple times. And then I took a copy with me home. So just so that you know. Like, what's wrong? Why do you say these things, Brian?
Yeah. And they talked about how Brandon didn't want to just be known as the gay guy, which I think the only I think Survivor wanted him to be known as the gay guy because and in the year 2001, all you'd need to be like progressive is to say like, hey, there's someone who's gay, and that's it.
Yeah.
But he had interesting, like you said, the whole thing where he was making strategy with Lex and trying to get himself further. He had stuff going on, but then they just didn't focus on that.
Yeah.
In fact, when they're going through the casts, he's like the flamboyant Brandon.
And like, okay, so Brian like saying that like, oh, here your thing is boiled down to this thing. I know that he was saying that just so that he could have, because like Frank was voted off right after him, so it could be like the flamboyant Brandon and his movie date Frank. Like I get that you want the juxtaposition of those two to kind of poke fun at that again, but at the same time, like he is like what you were saying. He wanted to go on, be more than just the token gay guy. It's like, okay, and now here's our token gay guy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And then, but yeah, and he was one of the ones. Brandon got a lot of focus in the reunion. He was able. They talked to him a bunch.
Yeah,
and they talked to Lex, and I liked Lex's answer. It says like, because at that point, it's like we're getting past the point in society where like tattoos are a big deal. But they're like, what if your son wants to get a bunch of tattoos? And he's like, hey, once he's 18 and can pay for them, he can get what he wants. It's very matter of factly.
I don't remember that moment, but I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
Like that was one thing too, like when we talked about how Lex stood out and like in his personality, but like honestly, everything about him stood out. His tattoos made him unique. His hairstyle was unique, and you know the earrings that he had, or gauges, I can't remember exactly, but like he had something in his ears that stood out. You know, he was just a character that like really popped. And
he was like a punk rock star from the 90s.
He really was. He's like, he walked off of Green Day stage to be on Survivor.
The band I was thinking, yeah. Like, do we know, is he a musician? I don't think musician is his job.
No. But I wouldn't be surprised if he was a musician. Or if he played stuff. Hang on. Lex Vandenberg. He is a drummer.
Oh.
That's the first thing. Yeah. Look at that. Why do you say it like that?
I don't know.
Take me a second.
I'm not saying anything negative about drummers.
Yeah, all right.
Which, okay, I'm saying that because Matt drums, but you play a number of different musical instruments. Like, would you consider drumming to be like your most prominent one?
No, I'd say piano. I've been playing piano since I was 4, but I've been playing drums since I was like 12 or 13. Yeah. I have probably some more versatility with drums, maybe, but
yeah. You know that I played piano from ages 5 to 12, and I haven't played since.
That's on you, man.
I know. I mean, I probably would be good if I had kept playing out.
So here, I've got Lex's profile here. He's a punk rock drummer. His list of previous work experience includes being a carpenter, radio DJ, musician, motivational speaker, and corporate marketing manager. One of those is not like the others. And it's carpenter, you're right.
Yes. Well, I know that Richard Hatch also did some corporate consulting stuff as well. So maybe, I don't know. I don't think they work together, but it just goes to show maybe that's just something you can do after Survivor.
I guess. right underneath it is like, and then Lex has been married to Kelly for 10 years. I'm like, wait, what? But
Different
I'm sure
Kelly.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
The one thing, this isn't specific to this season, but some stuff that I like about these early seasons of Survivor that they don't do anymore. They have like the what's it called, the rite of passage at the very end, where it's like the last. Sometimes you do it the final 3 or 4, where they have the walk through all the torches of the previous contestants. They have like slow mo like footage of everyone who got voted out. It just takes a lot of real estate in the episode, but I always thought that was a really cool moment to show like
Yeah.
these were our final 3. They don't really do auctions anymore because in future seasons, eventually when they start putting game advantages in there, and there's a season where they're like no one's bidding on anything, and Jeff's like, "Are you guys all just waiting to bid on advantages?" And they're like, "Yeah, basically." And they never did that again.
Do they still do like have sponsors in these? Because like early on it was like, Target was a sponsor in season 2. So there's like 3 different games. It's like Target brought to you by this, and like Doritos was a sponsor, and so they had Doritos and a couple challenges, and Mountain Dew and a couple challenges.
And Mountain Dew was a big one, like, and all the Mountain Dew you can drink.
Which I'm like that would make me get off of whatever thing I was standing on.
Yeah, you're a Mountain Dew guy.
Yeah.
I think they do. May not be as blatant, but I do know. And there's a future season somewhere in the 30s where it was a big deal that there was a contestant who was under 21, and so when the challengers, they're like, you'll get, if you win this, you'll get a bunch of burgers and steaks and beer and soft drinks for him, and it's just
you don't get a beer.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's it. Is there anything else? Okay, I'm sorry. I asked you this for season 2, but I think you can guess. But what is your favorite character?
Well, for me, I'm not surprised. I know I said it was Ethan when I was airing, but I'm gonna have to say Big Tom. He makes the show fun.
Yeah, Tom's pretty great. I actually think I like Teresa the most. Like Tom's good. He's great for a laugh. I enjoyed him, but I just was rooting for Teresa. And I even knew that she wasn't going to win, and I still was rooting for her.
Yeah. I like Teresa too. That's a solid answer.
Who's one that you felt made it further than they should have?
Further than they should have. Honestly, I might say Kim Johnson.
Ooh, burn. I know she was pre-merge, but I think Lindsay should have been like one of the first. Like, I mean, she got the votes the first on Samburu. She just happened to beat Carl in that game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was kind of the spearhead of the lazy group.
She was, and she fought for their right to do nothing.
Yeah,
that was her. So, all right.
It's like I've heard on different seasons from different survivors that like no matter what the season, it's boring. Like a lot of times you're sitting out there. They show it sounds like we're strategizing and talking and doing all this, but you're condensing 3 days into 45 minutes.
Yeah,
it's like not like you think that with all that time being bored, wouldn't you get up and start being productive just to have something to do?
And 20 minutes of those 45 minutes are the actual challenges themselves, competing in the challenges.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's I would hate to be an editor of that because there's so much stuff that happens. So you're just like, what do I pick out? And then even in the conversations that are happening, like, what 5 lines do I pick out in this conversation that highlight the importance of it so we can move on? It's gotta be hard.
I wonder, it'd be interesting to see someone who's done that. I wonder if the cameraman, like as they're filming, can they somehow make notes like, oh, hey, something interesting happened here. We're going to bookmark this and have like your short list of like stuff to choose from.
I can imagine that. Yeah. Cause that's a lot of footage to go through. I can imagine that's how they have to do it. Like people on site to be like, okay, let's mark this.
One thing I know is they do way more talking heads than you think. And so they cherry pick out from all the talking heads to show the narrative. So a lot of times it's like, a lot of seasons you see someone before tribal council saying like, you know what, I feel confident. I think I'm safe. I'm not going to get voted out. And then boom, they get voted out. And I remember for a while I was thinking like, why do people keep saying this in talking heads? It never works out. And then I realized, there's probably like 8 people who said that, and they just showed the person who get voted out because that makes it for a better story.
Yeah. They ask every single one the same question, and
yeah.
Or like they use old from like a couple days before, like before the actual thing happens, because I'm sure that they also will air talking heads out of order, where it's like, this was from 2 days before the big incident that blew up camp, and you were doing okay with your teammates, so that, you know, you saying that you weren't lying then, but things have changed since that part. So
yeah,
I don't know. Well, that is it for season 3 of Survivor. It's in the books. We're going to go now live to Jeff Probst in his new location, revealing what we're going to do for the next time. No, not really. All right, well, let's just jump to trivia, because last week we had our special guests on. And so if you didn't listen to that episode, if you are a fantasy football junkie like me, then you might appreciate this episode, because we kind of did a fantasy draft to create our own best lineup for a TV show, and so you'll for a comedy show. So check that out. So last week we talked about
anyways, you started. It was the Lego Batman movie.
Yeah.
So last week, one of our teams had Will Arnett on it, and so that kind of inspired us to ask about his great movie, Lego Batman movie. But one of the villains of the Lego Batman movie was actually played by an actor who was on someone else's roster. And so if that doesn't make sense to you, just listen to the episode. But who voiced or what actor was in Lego Batman movie as one of the villains? And it was Jason Mantzoukas as the Scarecrow from Lego Batman movie. So Jason Mantzoukas, he's in a lot of TV shows. He pretty much plays himself in all of them, or he plays the same type of character in every single one.
I think he does well when he's a recurring character who's not there every week, because it'd be a lot.
He is. Yeah, he's a lot to handle, but when they only bring him back sporadically, it usually is pretty good.
I think my favorite of him is a Pimento in Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah. So the trivia for this week, we talked a lot about Lex. This is the Lex season. So I wanted to ask you, what was Lex's luxury item in Survivor Africa? Do you know what it was?
What was his luxury?
Lex.
Did you read that up in the lexicon?
I did.
Does he drive a Lexus?
But in this lexicon that I looked up, is actually like a Wikipedia type thing. You were right that Lex answered Lindsay, and like everything that you're saying, the payout for Lex and actually for Tom, who was also affected, they ended up paying Tom, Lex, and Kim Johnson all $100,000 because they were all affected by it. So all three of them got the $100K, all because of that question. So. Wow. That's your bonus trivia that we're answering in this episode. But yeah, Lex's luxury item. What was that? Let us know if you know what it is. If you don't know what it is, that's fine. Look it up online. See if you can find it. Or just listen to next week's episode, which is going to be great or not next week. The next episode that we have, because it's going to be fantastic. You want to know what it is? Too bad. You'll have to check it out. Until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.